Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. This is also the weekend of the finals for the Alliance tournament, so definitely something that you can take a look at. On top of that, next week we should have a unique event that deals around the Abyss. So if you're here for some speculation, there might be some interesting ships that might be speculated on. Of course, the one that you all know is the King of the Abyss, the Gila. So we'll see how that works out. But I also, before we get started, want to quickly show you guys a sale that I did jump on, because it is something that I think is just nice extra value for something that you would normally do anyways. Here is a sale, 30 days Omega, and you get the Jackdaw animated skin. So that is really nice. I don't usually buy extra cosmetics myself, but this one, you know, it's just 500 plex. It adds to the game time. If you pay for your account anyways, this is practically a no-brainer to grab it. So it's something that I did myself as well. It's not that difficult. You just click on it, buy now, 500 plex are gone, and you get the Jackdaw animated skin in your redeemable items. Definitely something that I felt like missing out on that would have been a waste, and you can only do so until the 20th. So there we go. Next up, we are here for the market, of course, and as always, we are going to start with some plex and stuff at 145. Like that, and here we go. Plex have basically not moved. You may already have been able to tell that from the ticker. We are at 2.8 million ISK for the sellers, in GTA 2.7 for the buyers. If we go to the player-owned trade hubs, we go down to 2,750,000 pretty much for the sellers, and the buyers barely go up. So 2.7 million for those. You can see that we are flattening out at a one-year low price, so this is definitely a nice time for people that want to plex their accounts, or if you're looking for that investment, I do think personally that this is a very nice time to do so. Although now with the plex purchases for that extra skin, we might get a little bit of a bump after this weekend, because I do think that a lot of people will jump on that opportunity. And if you're anything like me, even though I pay for my account, well, 500 plex added game time and get that skin, I pay that with plex. I'm not going to break out my credit card or anything like that for that sale. Next up, we have the multiple pilot training certificates. Pretty much the same pattern, except that we are not at a one-year low. That was in April when we broke 880 million ISK on the downside. You can see the increased volume, so we are still talking about sales and prices below a billion ISK. The potential of 1.3, 1.5 billion does exist. We can see that from the chart. Sellers are coming in at 1 billion, just below that. Buyers are coming in at 960 million, so very narrow margin here. I do think that the market is again forming a bottom. If CCP continues with the crazy sales, then we might see something different. But if all of that calms down in basically the second half of the summer here, and then if towards like a winter release or something like that, they don't do too many sales, I do fully expect prices to go up, and an investment now with the horizon on the summer in plex related items, I think makes a lot of sense. Next up, we have the skill extractors, of course, following the pattern of the plex very closely. One-year low point, flattening out, so basically creating a bit of a bottom here. 314 million for the sellers, 308 million for the buyers. What I personally like about the change to plex here, what I don't like is it does obfuscate a little bit the price of goods and the price of a month game time. Always having to do the 500 times calculation in your head. It used to be a lot easier, right? One plex, 30 days game time, you knew exactly the price. Now you have to calculate that a little bit. But on the other hand, this does make investing in this category affordable, doable for pretty much any player. If you want to, if you don't have a lot of ISK, you can go into plex, because you can start purchasing those for less than 3 million. You get a little bit more, you can go into the skill extractors, you get even more ISK and a lot of patience. You can go for the billions of ISK and go into multiple pilot training certificates, and the large skill injectors as well are up to down to 728 million ISK, but yeah, 700 to 800 million ISK, not that affordable for everyone, but this does create basically tiers in the Plex related items so that you can start your investments in these no matter how much ISK you have to throw at it. So large scale injectors, continuing the chart here, a little bit of a bump after reaching 720 million ISK here. Also, in my opinion, 1 year low and a bit of bottom forming here. Sellers coming in at 728 million, as I said, and buyers at 714, also very, very narrow margin. So here the buyers are not really willing to go even lower at this point, and it's the sellers that are probably, you can see that there is quite a bit of supply in the last 24 hours. It's still in the last 24 hours. They're still pushing that price down. Once the sales end, I do think that we'll see an upward trend in these. For the small scale injectors, that is doing another leg down here, actually reaching the 1 year low point right now and breaking 150 million, 146.5 for the sellers, 142.5 for the buyers of small scale injectors. Obviously again a 1 year low point, and if you look at this chart, in my opinion, a pretty nice opportunity to grab some. It looked like that as well in July, of course. We had this nice downtrend, 1 year low point as well, and that is why I always say if you do make these investments, don't put all your ISK into a single purchase, but let's say that you bought 5 small scale injectors at this low point here for around 150 million. You can now basically buy a couple more for less than 150 and try to get your average just below 150 million ISK. Then you know your investment point, and you can try to make some profit from that. Next up, we still have the daily alpha injector that is basically normalized at around 60 million ISK, 58 million for the sellers, 54 million for the buyers. This is bought directly from the New Eden store, so it's really sales from Plex have, well, should actually have an impact on this one. Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, we'll take a quick look at it. I am actually interested in that. Don't you just buy the daily alpha injectors? Let's look for daily. Look. That is quite slow, but there is the daily alpha injector just costing 20 plex, so the plex sale should indeed have an impact on the daily alpha injector market, and it doesn't. So does that show that there's actually a lot of demand from from the alpha players at the moment for skill points? It's definitely a possibility, because this is a little bit against the grain. If this costs Plex, then you would expect this to follow Plex more closely than what it is doing now. A bit of an outlier in the Plex stuff category. Let's move on to some minerals at 8 minutes. Like that, and I think for titanium you can see that it is good news, but also a mistake from me. I sold at 6.5 ISK here, and you can see that we went up again. So here the same rule should actually apply when it comes to selling, as long as it's not too obvious that the top has been reached. You could decide to like sell half your titanium at a current price, wait another week, or keep an eye on the upcoming days, and if something like this happens, you could now sell for an even better price of your titanium. We have averages of above 7.5 ISK. Even historically speaking, before the massive changes to mining that basically increased supply massively with the Rorcal, with the Orca, and with Moon Mining, this would still be considered, even before that, a very high price for titanium. So 7.75 for the sellers, 7.3 ISK for the buyers. This is very, very high, and the big supply is coming in at 8 ISK for 2 billion, 8 billion in 4 sell orders here in the last 24 hours. But yeah, the titanium seems to be in super high demand, probably because of the destruction of all of those very big ships, all of those Titans, and some Excel structures, which probably need a lot of titanium to be rebuilt. And as a result, here we get lots of increases in a price all of a sudden. Also, a theory that I saw about all of this is that the large groups are often also poaching miners at the moment from HiSec, and as a result we actually get lower supply from HiSec itself to JITA, causing this increase in price. Although personally, with compressed feldspars and things like that, I do think that there is plenty of ways for the market to be connected even to nullsec when it comes to titanium. That's my personal feeling. I think that there is just increased demand because of all of the destruction that happened in nullsec. That is actually playing a major part in this increase in price. But this is an incredible opportunity, of course, if you still have compressed ores that have titanium in it, or if you have titanium stocks still lying around. You are getting the better price that we've gotten in more than a year, and even historically speaking, this is absolutely an amazing price for titanium. 7.75 is pretty much. Next up we have pyrite. Is that showing any signs of increasing? Well, we do have a volume increase, but the price is still remaining between 4 and 4.5 ISK, so it's definitely not across the board. 420 for the first seller, 440 for most of them, and 414 for the first buyer in perimeter, in fact, not in Jita itself. That's 404, so definitely still very low prices for pyrite at the moment, and yeah, showing the disparity at the moment between the supplies of the different minerals. While titanium needed for those big ships seems to be in short supply and spikes up massively, pyrite and probably isogen as well do not. Is Mexlon going up? Well, it is trying. Second step up here to almost 75 ISK, so not bad. This is obviously also one of the bottlenecks for nullsec. Mexlon is generally being mined less than they need compared to the other minerals that they mine, and as a result we do get a decent price for our Mexlon. 74 ISK for the sellers and 70 ISK for the buyers. Anything above 70 is above average, I think. 75 is basically the higher end of a normal price for Mexlon, and 80 ISK is of course the outstanding price that we've seen 3 times in the last year already. Can we repeat that? Well, we need to have the action in nullsec to continue, of course, so that their Mexlon bottleneck continues to be squeezed as well, just like titanium. So as long as this goes up, there is potentially a better price for Mexlon in the future as well. But if the action dries up there, if we don't have those massive engagements with, which from my feeling honestly is really because the Imperium now has such a massive super capital fleet that they're actually willing to use them and also lose them. They're willing to trade one-on-one for their supers at the moment, just because they can replace them so much better than their enemies, and so they are the ones that that try to make that conflict happen, where the other side is probably wanting to have like more of a decisive victory that would end this war, and they may go for the boredom tactic as well, which is to just not undock if they're not certain that they have the upper hand. So we'll see how that works out. Nullsec politics are always interesting, but for a player like myself are definitely a little bit foreign. Next up we have isogen, and I think we'll have a pyrite-like chart. Yes, indeed, continuing to stay between 25 and 30 ISK. Even that massive volume spike, it doesn't affect the price. So that is basically a massively oversupplied mineral in the game at the moment, just like pyrite. 27.2 for the sellers, 27.2 for the buyers. It's basically super cheap at the moment. And then we have Noxium, which last week did a pretty jump up to get back above 300 ISK basically. Let's hope that it can defend that price point. We went up to 350 ISK. We have to give back a little bit of ground, but it is still an average price for Noxium at the moment. 333 ISK for the sellers and 320 for the buyers. The danger, of course, is that on a quieter period, you do know now that 300 ISK can be broken, and that 250 ISK is actually a price that the market is willing to play with for Noxium. It's been inconceivable for most of the year where 300 was actively defended, and you see some of these bounces back up once the price reached that price point. But I think that basically now the market knows better, knows that 250 is possible, and so those buyers are going to drop their buy prices very quickly towards that price range, I think, if more supply comes in or if demand drops a little bit. And then we've got Zydra next, flat at the 1 year low point as well, of course. That's due to the moon mining changes. 541, 542 for the sellers and 522 for the buyers. Basically the new normal for Zydrine and Megasite as well. It's no longer nullsec that dictates this price. I do think that it's the moon mining activities in highsec that actually are dictating the price at the moment, because you can see the volumes here: 5 million, 5 million, 9 million, 2 million, 1 million. These are the types of volumes that you get from your moon mining activities. What we used to see is a lot fewer sell orders, because it was really exporters from nullsec or sometimes wormhole space that would bring the supply, and they would completely dominate the market and dictate the price as well. Now you have this constant stream of highsec miners that are maybe no longer focusing on stuff like titanium and stuff like Mixlon, but that are instead focusing on their moon mining activities and bringing in healthy batches, a constant supply of these minerals, and more than the game needs at the moment, because we also have 1 year low prices in both Megasite and here in Zydrine and Megasite, which you can see right here, continuing the slow trickle down to, well, 600. Can we get 600 here? Right around 600, and actually evolving below 600 is at the moment. 585 for the sellers, 40 million, but here look at that: 5 million, 1 million, 3 million, 1.5 million, another 4 point. Those are, I think, moon mining batches that have come to the market. And then 583 for the buyers. And then finally we still have more Fight Tech 2 related that is staying above 11,000 ISK. Not so bad here. So we get 11,200 for the sellers and 10,500 for the buyers. Definitely a prolonged sell opportunity for Morphite. It is a mineral, you mine it just like the rest. Although I don't think you can mine it in highsec, even from moon mining. And it is related to the Tech 2 industry. So it is a bit of a unique one in the mineral market. Next up, we move on to our PI at 1640. Like that, and let's take a look at those. Here are the broadcast nodes. So we now know from the updates to the updates website that there are new upwell structures in the making, but I must also warn you, these are basically more nullsec replacements. So there will potentially be strong demand for them. You know, people will want to deploy them and they actively get used and destroyed as well. But considering the scale of these items, we don't know how much advanced PI materials will be involved in the construction of them. That remains a big gamble, and I feel like, considering that broadcast nodes here, for instance, are staying well shy of 2.2 million at the moment, that the market is also hesitating on pulling the trigger. 2.1 million for the sellers, less than 2 million for the buyers. If you're still looking for some of those cheap broadcast nodes, you can buy them for 2 million without too much trouble. And I think that if you want to make that investment, this is still a great time to do so. The construction blocks next are also diving down from 12,000 ISK, so going back below average here. 12,200 for the sellers, but 11,200 for the buyers. So the sellers are still okay, still around average, but it's the buyers that are dropping down to well below average. And sometimes they win out as well, because you can see that the average prices are diving below 12,000 ISK. So it is not impossible for you to grab construction blocks at, let's say, 11,300 ISK, because you can clearly see that it's both the sellers and the buyers that are creating this average here. Consumer electronics, after reaching a 1-year high of 16,000 ISK, has to give back some ground here, selling for 13,750, buyers coming in at 13,500. So there is still strong demand, and I would still put the price at a little bit above average, but it is definitely not the 1-year high. Well, actually, considering the charts, it's probably around the average price again for consumer electronics. The coolants have to give a little bit of ground as well, coming from 11,000 ISK, a 1-year high point, no, but definitely a high point since the introduction of the moon mining changes, which had cut down quite a bit of the demand for fuels. So this is still healthy between 10,000 and 11,000 ISK, 10,900 for the sellers and 10,300 for the buyers. That is still even before all of these changes, this was an average price for coolants. So let's hope that 10,000 can be defended. Anything below that, is that a buy opportunity? I personally feel like yes, but you never know with what's currently happening with structures and the new fuel demands and things like that. Enriched uranium staying above 12,500 ISK, so that's also fuel related. almost 13,000 ISK for the sellers, 12,700 for the buyers. Definitely a pretty good price, although this looks very nice on the chart. Again, keep in mind that this slump down here is all due to all the POSs being removed from Nasdaq for moon mining, replaced with refineries, and well, we have now finally recovered basically from that slump. This is not an extremely good price. This is an average normal price, I think, for these PI materials that are related to fuels. The integrity response drones, the investors did strike on this one. We went to 2.2 million pretty much. Here is the spike. It's not that big, but it's definitely twice the average. And you can now see that the price is back to a more normal price of around 2.5 million, 2.6 for the sellers, 2.5 for the buyers. That is the investments that are keeping an eye, of course, on potential buy opportunities. And this was a pretty pronounced one for the response drones. The mechanical parts, same pattern as coolants, went up to 12,500 ISK. Great price, even historically I think above average. Now we have to go back towards 10,000 ISK here, 10,500 for the sellers and 10,500 for the buyers. So what is potentially happening here is that some people are moving back after seeing this recovery of the price towards producing mechanical parts, producing coolants, because it's very easy to do. Gas planets, very ubiquitous, and barren planets, also very common, even in high-sec or in all spaces. And as a result, we see that fresh supply. Let's hope that we don't break 10,000 ISK on the downside, but potentially this does have quite a bit of volatility to this downtrend here. The nuclear reactors, after a little bit of a spike up to 120,000 ISK, is back below 100,000 ISK. Buyers are at 87, so I would again call this a slight buy opportunity. You can buy nuclear reactors for less than 90,000 ISK if you're still looking for that investment, but volatility has died down here, and we'll have to wait for another spike before we can actually make a good sale on this. Organic mortar applicators, back to the lower end of the average. Where are the buyers at? That's what's important. Just above 1 million. Okay to do, not a super pronounced buy opportunity, but you know, very narrow margin here. You can definitely grab some organic mortar applicators for less than 1.1 million. Pretty much, you could buy hundreds at that price, and you know, even on this chart, it's the lower end of the average, so that is an okay investment if you're looking for that structure investment. The robotics, also fuel related, went up to 110,000 ISK. Has to give background again. I hope that 100,000 ISK can be defended for the people that are producing fuel-related PI materials. The buyers are below that, 98,000, and the sellers are coming in at 103,500. So this is definitely a bit of a pullback from the fuel-related PI materials after, well, reaching close to 1-year highs on a lot of them. Definitely a nice recovery that is stalling at the moment. Self-harmonizing power cores also dipping down, playing with 2 million on the chart. Buyers coming in at just shy of 2 million. Sellers at 2 million as well though. So personally, when I'm seeing this, if I do want to make my investment of 100 self-harmonizing power cores, I buy 100 right now and call it 2 million and wait for the spike. Superconductors are going back up a little bit. They went back down to less than 12,000 ISK, so a little bit below average, but are already selling again for 13,275, 13,500 for most of them, and the buyers coming in at 12,340. That's probably a little bit above average for both of them. So another second small sell opportunity for the superconductor producers out there. Test cultures continuing the slow decline, now breaking 7,500 on the chart, 7,600 for the sellers and 7,300 for the buyers. If you don't want to make the bigger investments, I should say, for the advanced PI materials for the upcoming structures because of their smaller scale, then this is your go-to, I think. Personally, this spike here, I think it's related to the refineries, to moon mining and things like that. Must be something along the production lines that does increase demand for test cultures. And you can see here 7,300 on this entire chart here is well below everything. this is where I would put a little bit of risk in if you're not sure about taking the gamble on advanced PI materials. This is very pronounced as well. 1 year low point breaking 7,500. This is where the market took off here. This is where the market took off here. This is your time to grab some test cultures in preparation, I think. And then the wetware mainframes are creating another pretty pronounced buy opportunity. Data points here at 2.01 million. 1 year low points for sure. Buyers are coming in at 208. Here 2.2 million for the sellers. Here I would have the patience, of course, for a buyer, I think. Although it's not even that much of a difference. It's practically try to grab for less than 2.1 million. I think that's what I would try to do. So pretty interesting PI market here, and definitely, you know, this one personally for me, test cultures, that feels the most interesting. I'm very likely to actually go and grab some of that. Next up, the advanced moon materials coming in at 25.30. Like that. Still need to get used to this one a little bit, so let's start with crystalline carbonite. Basically up just a touch, but in the last 10 days or so flat at the current trade range of slightly below average, selling for 172, buyers at 164. We still see quite healthy supplies, so maybe 164 for the buyers. Can we get something like that on the scale? Let's take a look. Definitely towards the lower end. If you're still looking for that carbide related investment, I would still look at the crystallines here. On the buyers, here is the Fernite carbide. After spiking up to above 200, is basically landing there now. 198 for the sellers, 188 for the buyers. Decent supplies again, around an average price. Next up we have number 3, titanium carbide, also jumping up above 200 and landing there. So actually feels like a slightly below average price still, but 202 for the sellers, 202 for the buyers. Basically the market is back on that price and is agreeing with it. It's not a buy opportunity, it's not really a sell opportunity either. And then tungsten carbide from the Amar feel like they were above average for the last couple of months, and now the market is trying to pull them back towards a more normal price, closer to 200 disc. 237 for the sellers, 220 for the buyers. Maybe you can consider this one to be a bit above average. 200 disc, that's the price point I think that we'll have to look at for our buy and sell opportunities. And the crystallines are well below 200 disc, and on these buy orders, that's I think your one buy opportunity here. No pronounced sell opportunity. Next up, the meta materials. Here are the photonic meta materials. After climbing up to 22.5 thousand disc, have to give back quite a bit of those gains. Sellers 21.5, but buyers at less than 20,000 disc. They want that price to go back down towards the average. Next up we have the plasmonic. Same picture here, went up to almost a 1 year high, almost 30,000 disc. Definitely a nice sell opportunity, but the volatility is back and we are back towards the average price. 22,000 for the sellers and 21.7. It's a very narrow margin here again as well for the buyers. Definitely a bit of a pullback back to the more normal prices for metamaterials. I think here 20k will have to be our scale for trying to devise a buy opportunity, and maybe close to 30,000, or we'll have to wait for the spikes for sell opportunities. So far none of them are too interesting. Non-linear metamaterials also still selling above 30,000 disc. I would say that is still well above average and worth selling. 31,500 for the sellers, 30,700 for the buyers. And then finally we also have terahertz metamaterials. These are diving down to less than 25,000. This is coming back towards 20, not yet. And this is actually the bottom. 20 is actually the bottom for the terahertz ones. 22,800 for the sellers, 21,300 for the buyers. If I try to get 21,300 on the chart, that starts to look pretty interesting. So to be honest, if you really want an investment in advanced moon materials, so far crystalline carbonites and terahertz metamaterials on the buyers, Definitely don't go for those sellers just yet, but on the buyers do look pretty interesting at this point. And now we've got the other stuff. Fermionic condensates staying well above average at the moment and basically flat at the current trade range. We've got the ferrogel that's actually up a little bit, but again trading above average at the current price, so nothing too pronounced and definitely no buy opportunities or anything like that to be spotted. Fluorides are in a pretty volatile period. Are we going below 1,000 disc on the buyers? Not yet. They're back towards what I would call an average price, but keep that volatility in mind. This might be a buy opportunity if we jump back up to 1,500 at some point. On the other hand, the peaks are going back down. Then we've got the hypersynaptic fibers, again a bit above average, having to finally give some ground. Sellers coming in at less than 15,000 ISK, but nothing too pronounced, and definitely, I'd want to see buyers close to 10k before I call a buy opportunity and a well below average price. Nanotransmitters super flat at 6,000 ISK, not much to say. Phenolic composites playing with another 1 year high here, well above 3,000 ISK, definitely worth selling. 3,260 for the sellers and 3,160 for the buyers. Again, in the very narrow margin, so strong demand and definitely something that you can sell. And then we finally have the ceramic fibers that also show that same pattern of still selling, basically flat at the above average trade range. Yeah, I do like this chart on the buyers, and this one here still below 200 ISK. I think that potentially there could be an investment there as well. Alright, let's take a look at the results then. The Tech 2 ships for Advanced Move Materials, that's at 31 minutes. There we go. And I did make the change. You can already tell here that the Basilisk is there, so I took out the Command Destroyers. They were like too small in volume to make it worth it, and I added the logistics cruisers. Let's get started though. Here is the Ares at the moment. We also saw from the minerals that Morphite is still well above average, so I personally do think that we'll still see these higher prices and it'll be very difficult to find a buy opportunity. Here is the Ares actually going up in price, selling for 32.5 million. Buyers are still at 30 million. Supply wise, nothing too crazy, so this is great if you're producing these. If you want to buy them or invest in them, this is still not looking too good. Then we have our new product. Here is the Basilisk, volumes around 50 a day or a little bit below that, so still not great, but at least we do see a little bit of motion and a very pronounced dip at 230 million. That was quite a pronounced buy opportunity, so that does make this a very interesting chart in my opinion. The place where we're at unfortunately doesn't look that great, selling for 278 million ISK, buyers coming in at 260, bit of a narrow margin and slightly above average I would say, although at the tail end here we are going down in price slightly. I would need to see the chart below 250. Then yeah, we could consider, depending on where the buyers are at, to take a look at Basilisk for a buy opportunity. The Cerberus going down in price to 280 million ISK. I find this very interesting. 279 for the sellers, 258 for the buyers. With the Abyssal event in mind, Cerberus is a great ship for that as well. So that could be one to look into. Where are the buyers at? Less than 260. So let's look for 260 on the charts. There we go. Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad. If you're looking for a Tech 2 investment, and on top of that, you can speculate on the event for next week, the Cerberus. You know, you gotta grab it this weekend then, and you gotta grab it from the buy orders. But if you can grab some at 260, I think that's definitely a pretty good buy at this point. The Claw staying well above 30 million, in fact selling for around 35 million. So here there's just no investment to be made. I'm gonna go over these decently quickly. The Crow, after reaching a 1 year high, has to give back a little bit of ground, but since the buyers are still coming in at 32 million for the first one, 29.6, and then 35 million for the sellers, you can see nothing too crazy in the volumes. This is not really going anywhere, so I don't think this is the right time to be making a move on these. Crusader, same thing, trying to land towards 30 million. Has some momentum, but you can clearly see that we're nowhere near breaking that 30 million price range. What is interesting is the 442 here as the latest sell order. That is going to keep a little bit of pressure on that price. Perhaps in the upcoming weeks, if more supply does trickle in, this one could get interesting. Then we've got the Guardian, I think a very popular one for the logistics cruisers, spiked up to 300 million ISK right around August. So that's definitely a sell opportunity. And we do sometimes break to 50, just like right now. Buyers coming in at 223 million, sellers at 245. Availability is not too crazy anymore. I would say that the Guardian is actually in a buy opportunity at the moment. Something that that you could try to risk if you do want that Tech 2 investment. Very interesting looking on the chart. At 223 for the buyers is quite reasonable. The Heretic next. I did keep the interdictors here because I do think that those can be interesting from time to time. You do see on big fights, those guys get blown up quite a lot, and then you do get some quite healthy spikes. So it's all about finding the right time to, let's say, try and buy them close to 60 for less than 70, which is unfortunately not right now. Next up, we've got the Hound Stealth Bombers, also very interesting for the trading. You can see the spikes here, you can see the buy opportunities for less than 30 million. They do exist. Unfortunately, right now, selling for 40, buyers at 31.5. That is not going to happen. The Ishtar also going down substantially, breaking 250 million mark. That's interesting that it's in these heavy assault cruisers that we're seeing this happen now. 260 for the sellers, 235.8 for the buyers. Same thing as with the Cerberus in my opinion. This is an incredibly good PvE ship, potentially for the Abyss also very interesting. So this is also a purchase that I would personally consider. Try and grab them as close as possible to 236, and then you do have a very nice purchase for the Ishtar, even compared to the entire year here. Quite interesting. Next up, we've got the Manticore staying well above 35 million ISK, so no way we would be buying that, I think. Nemesis, another spike up, currently selling for 40 million. We don't have enough Nemesises in JITA at the moment, so definitely a great time to sell. If we had bought here for less than 30 million ISK, this would have been a very nice little trade. So it is important to keep an eye on it, but always feels a little bit risky to pull the trigger when it's not too pronounced. Here is the Oneros coming from a 1-year high point, so in my opinion this will probably be related to the big fights. Coming back down at the moment, we are looking at price for less than 200 million before we start purchasing though, and that is not happening just yet. Purifier next. That one is going down quite nicely, actually. You know, lowest point in 4 months, I would say. Are the buyers for less than 30 million? That is unfortunate. If this gap had widened a little bit more, 32.3 for the sellers, 31.7 for the buyers. If this had gone for less than 30 million ISK, then you could expect more momentum here and a pronounced buy opportunity. Now, you could try it, but it feels quite risky to me. Then we've got the Raptor, also again 30 to 35 million. That's a big no for me. The Saber, let's see, 79 for the sellers, 73 for the buyers. That's, yeah, again in that band of no, I don't think we can trade here. The Scimitar next, same story. Very interesting chart though. If you're looking for those trades, quite pronounced. You can sometimes grab them for 200 million ISK and then sell them for 300. So we are coming from that high point, 300 million. We're on our way back down. 268 still though for the sellers, 232 for the buyers. Still well above average, but showing that potential in these logistics cruisers for trades that is much more pronounced than in what we had previously. And then we've got the Stiletto. 35 million, on its way back down a little bit. Buyers at 32. Again, unfortunately, that's a no. And then the Taranis is dropping off. Let's take a look. Oops, sorry. At that, 29 million for the sellers, 28 million for the buyers. It's pretty obvious that this is not as popular an interceptor as some of the others, but if you're looking for that interceptor investment, hoping for another big fight where maybe some interceptor fleets are gone, I think you would need to have a nullsec fight where actual territory is being claimed, because I think that there you have a lot more use of those mobile fleets. Then this could be okay to try and grab a couple of these 28 million ISK Taranis ships. So Tech 2, yeah, definitely quite interesting, and also very good suggestion to add the logistics cruisers, because these charts do look a bit more predictable and interesting, especially so this time where is it? The Guardian here, that is quite interesting, right? Coming from that spike 300 million ISK, currently 223 for the buyers. That's more than 70 million ISK drop right here in almost no time, and you can see that this bottom get tested quite often and that the spikes up can be quite volatile. Yeah, logistics cruisers makes a lot of sense because these are used and destroyed quite a bit more in nullsec, even in smaller gangs as well. Next up, the Tech 3 ships at 39.45. Like that. So let's get started. Here is the confessor, basically still flat, increased volumes, not doing much on the price. So we've got 35 million for the sellers, 33 million for the buyers. We still have 192 here at 35 million, which is starting to push the price back down. If this keeps coming across the board, then we might actually see another play for 30 million on the market, in my opinion. So again, this looks like still a great price, 33 million for a confessor, not so bad, but don't make your entire confessor investment right now, because if this keeps coming, then I do think that the relisting and something like closer to 30 million on the buyers might actually still be in the cards, just like what we saw here. The Hecate next, staying shy of 40 million ISK, so it's 38 for the sellers, 35 for the buyers, and volumes, yeah, definitely not the same as the confessor, so not showing that oversupply potential. The Jackdaw is trying to get back below 40 million ISK and succeeding, 38 million, and that's here again 220 coming in at 38 million is going to put more pressure on the price. If you have 220 Jackdaws on the markets that are going down, you've got confessors with another 200 that are going down. Well, you get little choice but to start producing some Hecates that are at least still selling for 38 million ISK, 37 for the buyers. And then for the Zwepel, yep, here landing at 35 million ISK because of 240, another 60, so that's another 300 ships being brought to the market all of a sudden at 35 million. In my opinion, yeah, that production potential, I keep saying it, is still out there, and if we have like a couple of weeks with lower demand for these types of ships all of a sudden, then you will see a drop down in the price to an even lower price point. So be very careful when you're making those investments. This looks very promising, right? The Jackdaw finally breaking back through the 40 million mark, but how is it doing that with 220 Jackdaws at 38 million all of a sudden? That means that potentially there's way more Jackdaws out there, and on a couple of bad weeks, we could actually drop well below 35 million all of a sudden. For the cruisers, here is the Legion. Last couple of days basically flat at less than 180. Supply-wise, 300. Well, it's 165. Is all of that in the last 24 hours? Yes, it is. Okay, that's going to drive the price down. 300, 119. That is again pretty massive stocks. Could be some relisting and things like that, but it does show that potentially an oversupply situation is very much possible. For the Loki next, we gotta go up to 225 to find them, but here is 800 Lokis on the market as well. So again, a little bit of pressure as a listing happens of hundreds of ships, and then of course the competition starts to grind down on that price from then. Next up, we got a Proteus that is pretty much flat, also a bit of hesitation at the tail end, so I do think we'll see pretty big supply, exactly 180, 152, coming in at 150 million ISK. That's quite a lot of ships again. And then the Tengu, how is that one doing? Well, almost hesitating, so this might not be too crazy, but it is 600, 235, 120, coming in at 160 million ISK. This is the pattern that I personally I'm still a little bit fearful of, that is to see that oversupply, those hundreds of ships that are not being absorbed by the market. And so to me, this indicates that potentially the Tengu, which is competing down from 160 and was 165 last week, can very easily go to 150 as well, potentially. So yeah, be careful in that Tech 3 market at the moment. The only one that's not super oversupplied is the Hecate, but I fully expect hundreds of them to be coming by next week personally. And then for the extra category this week at 44 minutes, I'm just going to grab some cruisers that I think might be interesting for the Abyss, just to take a look at that. So cruisers, we definitely have the Pirate Faction cruiser, so something like the Gila. What's that one doing? Well, after a massive spike in June, up to 300 million ISK, which is of course Abyss related, we are now back down to a more normal price. Buyers are coming in at 205 million, sellers at 220. Most people that do run Abyssal sites have their Gila, I do think, but there might be renewed interest from the new event, and this is an okay price. If you can still grab some for like 205 million ISK, that's not so bad, I think, as a starting point. If you can then sell for 250 and up, that would be very nice, but it remains a little bit of a gamble, of course. I do think that the Stradios is still a very popular ship as well with newer players when it comes to these types of exploration combat sites that feel like going out into unknown spaces. That one is selling for, let's take a look at that, 183, 184 almost for the sellers, 172 for the buyers. Definitely feels quite affordable and feels slightly below average. Any of other Pirate Faction cruisers? Not really. I think after that you want to go for the heavy assaults. The Sacrilege, I know, is a very good ship and is already going back up here. So from 260 million back up to currently 350 on the chart, 355 million for the sellers, 326 for the buyers. It is, of course, a Tech 2 ship, more expensive at the moment. We're still paying that moon mining premium, unfortunately. But this is clearly not one to invest in my opinion, because it's already selling well above average. Still, the Sacrilege is a great ship for the Abyss as well. Anything else? Yeah, there's the Cerberus as well, of course. We saw that already, that one is actually down in price and in a pretty reasonable spot, 250, less than 260 for the buyers. And other than that, yeah, I would still say that the Ishtar is potentially pretty good as well. So that is maybe a buy opportunity. And we had the Munin. I think I read that people do use them very successfully in the Abyss as well. I'm not sure how you do that with those kinds of weapons. You saw my exploration test. It's probably me. I'm just too used to drones and missiles, which I think objectively is the better combination, but it also means that I've gotten maybe a little bit lazy when it comes to the other weapon types. May need to change that up a little bit at some point, but the Munin is also still selling for 305 million, bars at 284. Feels like a pretty expensive ship already. So there are potentially, I do think, some investments, but I would say Cerberus and the Ishtar, because they already feel naturally like they're in a pretty good spot to invest in them. Don't even need the event to make them worthy. And then the Gila, it's the king of PvE at the moment, I would say. And you know, that one, let's go for that chart, going back to a more average price, still a bit above average, but the buyers are at 205. So if you have that patience, then I do think that you can grab a pretty decently low priced Gila at the moment. Yeah, not much else to add for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.